He was my dad. The persona never really touched me. You know, when I saw him, he was Dad. Andre the Giant was known for his massive size, but did you know his daughter is actually even bigger than he was? How did she grow to surpass the legend himself? And what's her story? Join us as we explore the surprising facts about Andre the Giant's daughter and what makes her stand out. A giant is born. Andre the Giant was born on May 19, 1946, in Coulommiers, France, a small town about 40 miles east of Paris. From the moment he entered the world, it was clear he was different. Weighing in at 13 pounds at birth, Andre was far larger than the average newborn. His size at birth would only be the beginning of a life defined by extraordinary growth. Andre grew up in the nearby village of Moulins, a quiet farming community. Life in Moulins was simple and hard-working. Andre's parents, Boris and Marianne Roussimoff, were farmers. They lived modestly and worked tirelessly to support their 5 children. Andre was the middle child, and although he came from a large family, he quickly stood out. Unlike his siblings who grew at a normal rate, Andre shot up in size year after year. By the age of 12, he was already 6 feet 3 inches tall. By 14, he had grown to 6 feet 6 inches. No one else in the family shared this unusual growth pattern. There were hints that Andre's height might be genetic. His grandfather was reportedly very tall, though not nearly as large as Andre would become. At the time, his rapid growth was thought to just run in the family. Doctors didn't see any signs of hormonal issues early on. The medical understanding of conditions like acromegaly was limited, especially in rural areas. So Andre's size remained mostly a mystery to those around him. Despite his size, Andre lived a fairly typical life during his early years. He went to school like any other child in the village. But even during these early days, he experienced things that would later become legend. One of the most interesting stories from Andre's childhood involves the famous playwright Samuel Beckett. Beckett, who lived nearby and knew Andre's father, would often give Andre rides to school in his truck. Andre was too big to fit on the school bus, so Beckett offered a solution. The two would ride together in silence or casual conversation. And though Beckett would later become world-famous to Andre, he was just the kind neighbor who gave him a lift. But childhood didn't last long for Andre. His family struggled financially, and the demands of the farm were growing. By the time Andre turned 14, his father pulled him out of school so he could work full-time on the land. Andre accepted the change without protest, but it marked a turning point in his life. He lost the last piece of a normal childhood. From that point on, his days were filled with hard labor. Because of his strength and size, Andre could do the work of several men. He helped the family survive during tough times, but the cost was high. He missed out on being a regular teenager. Even though life was difficult, Andre never lost his sense of humor or kindness. He was known around Moulins as a gentle giant. People often remembered him for his warm smile and polite manner. Children in the village weren't afraid of him, and adults respected him. He had a certain charisma, even back then, a quiet presence that drew people in. This would later become one of his greatest strengths when he entered the world of professional wrestling. Andre's rapid growth would continue throughout his teenage years, and eventually the reason behind it became clear. He was later diagnosed with acromegaly, a rare condition caused by an overproduction of growth hormone. The condition affected his bones, especially in his hands, feet, and face. At the time, though, no one knew what was happening. Andre simply kept growing, and people continued to marvel at his size. He wore size 22 shoes and had to use special furniture even as a teenager, but he learned to live with it, never letting his differences get in the way of his good nature. Andre's childhood was marked by struggle, sacrifice, and unexpected fame, even before he ever stepped into a wrestling ring. Wrestling calls. By the time Andre was 17, he knew life on the family farm in Moulins wasn't enough for him. He had spent years working the land, helping his parents, and doing the hard physical labor that came with farm life. But deep down, Andre was bored. He also knew he was different, and not just in size. He wanted more from life, more excitement, more opportunity, and maybe even a little bit of adventure. So with determination and not much else, he left the countryside and headed to Paris. Paris in the early 1960s was a completely different world compared to Moline. It was bigger, louder, and full of new experiences. Andre took on various jobs to support himself. He worked as a mover, lifting heavy furniture with ease thanks to his natural strength. He was also spotted by people who couldn't help but notice his enormous size. Eventually, word got around to a local wrestling promoter. The promoter met Andre and instantly saw potential, not just in his build, but in his presence. Andre was tall, strong, and unforgettable. With the right guidance, he could become a star. Andre agreed to give wrestling a try. At first, it was a small, local thing. He wrestled in small French venues under the name Jean Ferret, a name inspired by a French folk hero. He was marketed as the Gentle Giant, and fans were amazed by his kind personality and incredible strength. His early matches helped him learn the basics of wrestling, how to move in the ring, how to tell a story through performance, and how to connect with the crowd. But it wasn't long before he outgrew the local scene. Promoters in other countries began to hear about the towering Frenchman. Soon Andre was invited to wrestle in Quebec, Canada, where the audience had a taste for more dramatic and intense personas. There he was rebranded as Monster Roussimoff. The new name was meant to sound more fearsome and grab attention. In Japan, where he also began wrestling, his size fascinated people. He stood out immediately, even in a culture that deeply respected wrestling as a sport and performance art. But the biggest turning point came in the early 1970s, when Andre caught the attention of Vincent McMahon Sr., the head of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, which would later become the WWE. McMahon knew that Andre was special, but he also knew that just being big wasn't enough. The wrestling world needed a larger-than-life character, someone fans would never forget, so McMahon gave him a new name, Andre the Giant. The name change was only part of the strategy. McMahon also made a smart decision that changed Andre's career forever. He made Andre a rare attraction. Andre would not wrestle every week in the same city. Instead, he became a special event. McMahon carefully limited Andre's appearances so that whenever he did show up, it felt like a big deal. This helped build the legend of Andre the Giant. Fans never got tired of seeing him because it was always a special occasion. Andre wrestled all over the world, up to 340 matches a year. He traveled constantly, going from country to country and city to city. He wrestled in Japan, Australia, Canada, and all across the United States. Wrestling that many times in 1 year meant Andre barely had time to rest. It was exhausting, both physically and mentally, but he kept going because he loved performing, and he understood his role in making wrestling bigger than ever. Part of Andre's success came from the way promoters marketed him. One of the most famous parts of his career was the idea that he was undefeated for years. This wasn't entirely true. He did lose matches, but promoters worked hard to build the myth. It made fans believe that Andre was unbeatable. It added to his mystique and made each match feel more dramatic. When he walked into a wrestling ring, people believed they were seeing someone unstoppable. Of course, being that big came with real challenges. Andre had a hard time fitting into cars, airplanes, and even hotel beds. Simple things like eating in public could be a problem. People would stare, ask questions, or sometimes even make rude comments. He often felt uncomfortable in public spaces. His health also started to suffer from the constant travel and the effects of acromegaly, the condition that made him grow so large in the first place. He lived with pain in his back, knees, and joints, but he rarely showed it in public. The Princess Bride. By the mid-1980s, Andre the Giant was already a legend in the world of wrestling. But his fame was about to reach even more people. Not in a ring, but on the big screen. That chance came with a movie called The Princess Bride, a fairy tale adventure full of humor, love, and sword fights. The movie's creators, writer William Goldman and director Rob Reiner, had a specific person in mind for the role of Pheasant, the gentle giant. That person was Andre. Goldman had actually written the character of Pheasant with Andre in mind. He saw Pheasant as big and strong, but also kind, funny, and lovable. To Goldman, Andre seemed like the perfect match in real life. Rob Reiner agreed. He thought Andre could bring something special to the film that no trained actor could. Genuine presence and charm that came from being naturally different. But getting Andre into the role wasn't simple. First, there was the language barrier. English was not Andre's first language, and reading a movie script was very different from memorizing wrestling lines or interviews. During auditions and early rehearsals, Andre struggled to pronounce some of the words clearly. He was nervous that he might mess up or be misunderstood. Still, Reiner and the rest of the team believed in him. They worked with him patiently, helping him go over his lines slowly, sometimes repeating them over and over until they felt natural. His deep voice and unique accent eventually became part of what made Pheasant so special. Then came the physical challenges. By this time, Andre's body was already under a lot of stress. Years of wrestling, travel, and the effects of acromegaly had caused serious back pain. He could no longer move like he once did. Simple things like bending down or standing for too long were painful. So when the movie script called for Pheasant to catch Princess Buttercup during a fall, the crew had to use a hidden rig. It looked like Andre was catching her with ease, but in reality, special effects and support wires helped make it happen without hurting him. There were other adjustments too. In one scene, Pheasant is shown riding a horse, but regular horses couldn't safely carry someone as large as Andre. So the crew had to specially rig the saddle and carefully guide the horse, making sure everything was balanced. Andre's size was a big part of the story, but it also made filming more complicated than anyone expected. Despite all of these obstacles, Andre gave the role his full heart. On camera, Pheasant became exactly who Goldman and Reiner had imagined, a giant with a big heart. Fans loved the way Andre delivered his lines, especially the sweet and silly rhymes with his partner in crime, Inigo Montoya. His most famous lines, like "Anybody want a peanut?" became fan favorites. Physic was funny, caring, and strong. Audiences instantly connected with him, and Andre's natural warmth came through in every scene. When The Princess Bride was released in 1987, it became a huge hit. It wasn't just a wrestling audience anymore. People of all ages got to see a different side of Andre. For many, this movie was their first introduction to him. He was no longer just a giant in the ring. He was a movie star, and one with heart. Andre himself was extremely proud of the role. He carried a VHS tape of The Princess Bride with him wherever he went. Friends and colleagues said that he would often show it to people, proud of what he had done. It was his favorite role outside of wrestling. For Andre, it meant more than just acting. It was proof that he could be more than what people expected. WrestleMania 3. By 1987, Andre the Giant was no longer just a wrestling attraction. He was a global superstar. But that year, something even bigger happened. He stepped into the ring for what would become one of the most important and talked about matches in professional wrestling history. Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3. This was not just a regular match. It was carefully built up as a battle between two legends. Andre was marketed as undefeated for 15 years, an unstoppable force. Whether or not that streak was completely true didn't matter. Fans believed it. On the other side was Hulk Hogan, the rising American hero and face of the World Wrestling Federation. Hogan was loud, muscular, and full of energy. He was everything young fans loved in the 1980s. Vince McMahon, the head of WWF, knew that putting these two giants together would create a moment people would never forget. WrestleMania 3 took place on March 29, 1987, at the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan. Over 93,000 fans filled the stadium, making it one of the largest crowds in wrestling history. Millions more watched from home. The event was marketed around one central theme. Could Hulk Hogan possibly defeat Andre the Giant? Behind the scenes, things were not as perfect as they looked. Andre's health was rapidly declining. Years of wrestling, travel, and dealing with acromegaly, a hormonal disorder that caused his extreme growth, had taken a serious toll. By 1987, his back was in terrible shape. He could barely walk without pain. Standing for long periods hurts. Even getting into the ring was difficult. But Andre refused to quit. He insisted on doing the match, no matter how much pain he was in. To get through it, Andre took painkillers. Some reports say he was in agony throughout the event, but he never let the fans see that. He knew the moment was bigger than just a wrestling match. It was a turning point. Andre was nearing the end of his in-ring career. Hogan was becoming the new face of wrestling. This match was a passing of the torch, physically and symbolically. The match itself was not a long technical battle, but it didn't need to be. It told a story. Andre dominated early, using his size to wear Hogan down. The crowd was fully behind Hogan, cheering him on. Every punch, every move built the tension. Then came the moment that made history. In front of thousands of screaming fans, Hogan picked up Andre and slammed him to the mat. It was a move no one thought was possible. At the time, Andre weighed over 500 pounds, and Hogan had never lifted that much in front of such a large audience. That body slam, followed by Hogan's finishing move, the leg drop, sealed the victory. Hogan pinned Andre, and the crowd exploded. That moment is still shown in highlight reels today. It became one of the most iconic moments in wrestling history. For fans, it was unforgettable. For Andre, it was the perfect way to give back to the business he had helped build. He let Hogan win. It was Andre's way of supporting the future of wrestling, even if he could no longer be the main star. Behind the scenes, Hogan has always shown deep respect for Andre. He has often said that he was nervous about the match and wasn't sure Andre would let him win. Andre, being the professional he was, gave Hogan the spotlight without hesitation. He knew what was best for the business. In that moment, Andre helped create a new era of wrestling while cementing his own place as a legend. After WrestleMania 3, Andre continued to wrestle for a few more years, but his body kept getting worse. Still, that match became the peak of his career. It was the moment when Andre wasn't just a wrestler, he was part of American pop culture. People who didn't even watch wrestling knew who Andre the Giant was. His image, size, and kindness became famous around the world. Final years and death. As the years passed, the toll that life and wrestling had taken on Andre the Giant's body became harder and harder to ignore. The man who had once amazed the world with his size and strength was now living with near constant pain. His health was declining, and every movement became more difficult. Andre's mobility was especially limited by the late 1980s and early 1990s. His back injuries were severe, and even standing for long periods caused discomfort. Walking became slow and painful. He avoided air travel when he could because the cramped seating was almost unbearable. His condition was worsened by acromegaly, the hormonal disorder that had caused his extreme growth in the first place. This disorder not only enlarged his bones and organs, but also led to a variety of serious health problems, including heart issues and joint degeneration. As public appearances and wrestling dates slowed down, Andre began to spend more time at his ranch, in Eller Bay, North Carolina. The ranch offered him peace and quiet, a place to escape the camera's noise and constant travel. He raised horses and enjoyed the stillness of rural life. It became his sanctuary. There he could relax away from the pressure of being Andre the Giant and just be himself, Andre René Roussimoff. But even in his private life, Andre's health challenges continued. He used all kinds of supports to help him move around. He rarely spoke about the pain he was in, but those close to him knew how much he suffered. Friends said he still laughed, still smiled, and still made jokes, but behind it all, he was tired. The man who once wrestled 300 times a year could now barely get out of bed without assistance. In January 1993, Andre returned to France to attend the funeral of his father, Boris Roussimoff. While staying at a Paris hotel, Andre passed away in his sleep from congestive heart failure. He was 46 years old. Despite everything he had endured, his death came quietly. There were no cameras or interviews, just silence. A giant had fallen, not in the ring, but alone in a hotel room. His death shocked the wrestling world. Wrestlers, promoters, and fans alike reacted with deep sadness. Vince McMahon, Hulk Hogan, and many others shared stories of Andre's humor, strength, and kindness. Though Andre had kept a low profile in his last years, his influence had never faded. The industry knew they had lost someone truly unique. Andre wasn't just a wrestler. He was a symbol of wrestling itself, especially in the 1970s and 1980s. There were complications with his cremation due to his enormous size. Regular cremation facilities couldn't handle someone of Andre's build. Eventually, arrangements were made, and his ashes were scattered on his ranch in North Carolina, his favorite place, where he had felt most at home. There was no huge funeral or elaborate tribute. That was Andre's wish. He didn't want a big event or a lot of media attention. In the end, the man who had been larger than life wanted to leave the world quietly. Fatherhood and fame. For all the fame Andre the Giant achieved in his life, the one role that remained complicated was that of a father. Behind the cameras and wrestling spotlight, Andre had a personal life that very few people ever saw. One of the most emotional and complex parts of that private life was his relationship with a woman named Jean Christensen and their daughter, Robin Christensen Roussimoff. Andre met John Christensen in the early 1970s. Jean wasn't just a model. She also worked in public relations for the wrestling industry. She was tall, standing at over 6 feet 4 inches, which naturally caught attention whenever she was with Andre. Together, they made a striking pair. Their relationship was never officially confirmed as a marriage, though many people assumed they were married because of how long they were together. In truth, their relationship was off and on for several years, lasting from around 1972 into the 1980s. They kept things fairly private, staying mostly out of the media. In 1979, Jean gave birth to a daughter named Robin Christensen Roussimoff. Robin was Andre's only child. Her birth should have been a big moment for Andre, but life didn't unfold in the typical way. While Andre did acknowledge Robin as his daughter, the connection between them was limited. Over the course of her entire life, Robin only met her father around 5 times. There were a few key reasons why Andre and Robin were never able to form a close bond. The first was Andre's schedule. As one of the most in-demand wrestlers in the world, he was constantly traveling. Some years, he wrestled in over 300 matches, moving between countries every few days. There was hardly any time for him to rest, let alone build a relationship with his daughter. Phone calls were rare, and in-person visits were almost impossible to arrange. But the distance wasn't just physical, it was also emotional. Andre lived his life as a mythic figure, someone larger than life. For most people, he wasn't just a man, he was the giant. That kind of public image made it hard for him to live a normal, personal life. When it came to fatherhood, Andre may have found it difficult to shift gears from being a global star to being a dad. People close to him have said that he cared about Robin, but he didn't know how to be a father. There may have been guilt, confusion, or even fear involved, emotions he rarely talked about. Jean also played a role in how things unfolded. After giving birth to Robin, she moved to the United States and raised her daughter on her own. Jean made a conscious decision to keep Robin away from the spotlight. She wanted her daughter to grow up in a quiet, normal environment, far from the chaos of the wrestling world. While this protected Robin from the public eye, it also created even more distance between her and Andre. The few times they did meet were often short and awkward, with little time to grow a real connection. The most heartbreaking part of this story came at the end of Andre's life. Andre died in January 1993, while visiting Paris for his father's funeral. But Robin didn't find out until a month later, and not through family or friends, but from one of Andre's lawyers. The delayed news made the loss even harder. She had barely known him, and now he was gone. There were no final conversations or goodbyes. Carrying the giant's shadow, Robin was raised primarily by her mother, Jean Christensen, in the United States. Jean had once worked in wrestling PR and had met Andre through the industry. She was tall too, over 6'4", and had caught Andre's attention partly because of their shared physical stature. But their relationship was never officially recognized as a marriage, and by the time Robin was born, they were already drifting apart. Robin's childhood was shaped by privacy and curiosity. Many people knew she was Andre's daughter, and that brought attention, sometimes unwanted. But her mother tried to shield her from the public, giving her as normal a life as possible under the circumstances. Robin has spoken openly in later years about the strange mix of being connected to someone so famous, yet feeling distant from him personally. Physically, Robin inherited some traits from her father. She is tall and strong, which has made her stand out just as her father did. But she has also been known for her strong will and independence. Unlike Andre, who entered wrestling in his teens and became an international star, Robin chose her own path, and it wasn't always in the spotlight. At one point, Robin considered a career in wrestling. Given her heritage and appearance, many fans and promoters were curious to see what she could do. She trained and gave it a try, but ultimately, the wrestling business didn't work out for her. It didn't feel like the right fit. She has said in interviews that she respects what her father accomplished, but didn't feel the need to follow in his footsteps in the ring. Instead, Robin has focused more on film, art, and storytelling, especially when it comes to telling her father's true story. She has worked closely with documentary filmmakers to bring more depth and truth to the legend of Andre the Giant. Two notable projects she was involved with were Andre the Giant, Closer to Heaven, a documentary from 2015, and HBO's Andre the Giant, which brought Andre's life into clearer view for a new generation of fans. Robin's role in these projects was not just as his daughter, but as a guardian of his legacy. She helped ensure the documentaries showed not just the performer, but the person behind the myth. She pushed for honest storytelling, including the painful parts of his life, like his health struggles, his loneliness, and the isolation that came with being so different from everyone else. To Robin, these truths were essential to understanding who Andre really was. Today, Robin lives a relatively private life in Seattle. She's not a public celebrity, and she chooses her appearances carefully. When she does speak, it's usually to support her father's legacy or to take part in something she believes in. She has been known to attend fan conventions or participate in interviews, but she does so on her own terms. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next video.